Joining us now is the acting consul general for Israel in New York, Aviv Ezra. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. And I do want to start with this meeting. Do you think that there was any agreement made on when Israel should end the war or who should lead Gaza if Hamas is successfully destroyed?
Natasha, thank you so much for having me tonight. I think we are coming to a very crucial timeline in which we need to move forward and to see how we could achieve the two goals that were defined in the beginning. At this point, Minister Dermer is in Washington, D.C., and is discussing both of the elements with the high-level officials in the United States administration. We express deep appreciation both to the executive branch and the legislative branch that has supported bipartisan, bicameral, and transcending administration support for Israel's right for self-defense and for actually Israel's duty for self-defense. But as you mentioned, the idea is to tackle both 2 points. One is to make sure that we release the hostages. We have at this point 129 that are still there. This is the holiday of seasons. These are a season of holidays, assuming that our children are still in the Gaza dungeons and they need to be brought back home. And the second is to prevent a continuous threat coming from the Gaza Strip in the shape of Hamas. And we are working closely with the U.S. administration to make sure, and there is no daylight on those topics, to make sure that they will be achieved.
You know, right now, the two-state solution, the rights of Palestinians seem very elusive. Can I ask, do you know Ron Dermer, and what do you think he and Netanyahu do envision when it comes to the future of Palestinians?
Well, in terms of the day after, I think our vision is pretty clear. First and foremost, we need to make sure that we have a demilitarized Gaza Strip. We are not going to be able to have, once again, a threat coming from a terrorist organization, by the way, of a designated foreign terrorist organization here in the United States, Hamas, that will have the ability to continue butchering and threatening our civilians. Mind you, October 6th, we were not in a state of war. Unfortunately, October 7th, while we were thinking that we could kick the can down the road in terms of the threat, they proved to us, meaning Hamas, that they meant what they said. They want to eradicate the state of Israel. They want to kill Israelis. They want to kill the spirit of Israel, but they also want to kill the peace process that we began having with Saudi. And I think I heard the commander interview with you a couple of seconds ago. I think he's 100% right. We need to zoom out and understand that Hamas does not just represent their own charter, but rather, if we zoom out, we see the threat coming from Hezbollah, another proxy of Iran, from the Houthis, another proxy of Iran. And you just mentioned the militias, the Shia militias in Iraq that came after U.S. deployed forces. And this is, of course, the place to wish them speedy recovery, all three of them. This all sends the messages back to Tehran. They need to be isolated. They need to understand that there are ramifications for what they're doing, and this will not be able to continue.
Okay, I appreciate that. You know, meanwhile, we are seeing just terrible images and video coming out of Gaza, this growing civilian death toll there. And this meeting in particular is coming amid growing pressure on the Biden administration to call for a ceasefire. In the past, you have said that a ceasefire is a prize for Hamas. With the increasing loss of civilian life in Gaza, do you still stand by that?
Obviously, we feel horrified for any innocent civilians that are paying a price here, but we want to make sure that it's pretty clear and understood that Israel, working in compliance with international law, Hamas, on the other hand, is using their own civilians as human shields. And it's pretty clear to understand that what they want to do is continue using these human shields and repeatedly go after Israel. They were very clear about what they want to do. If there will be a ceasefire, we'll be sending a lifeline to Hamas to continue staying in power and to continuously attacking Israelis. They said it out loud. It's not something that we're inventing. They promised to do it another October 7th again and again and again. So I think it's pretty clear that we need to make sure that Hamas is eradicated and innocent civilians are not paying the price. And we need to make sure that we cannot condemn Israel on this, because when you have Hamas hiding behind their innocent civilians, they will understand, if Israel will be pressured, that they can continue using that card, which is something that will be horrifying for the entire free world.
Yeah, I understand that Israel is fighting for its very existence. There was an extraordinarily deadly Israeli airstrike over the holiday weekend on a refugee camp in central Gaza. It killed at least 70. Does Israel need to do more to prevent civilian deaths in Gaza?
Well, I think there has to be a moral clarity and a differentiation between a terroristic organization like Hamas, who is deliberately going after innocent civilians, and between Israel, that is doing its utmost to prevent any attacks against innocent civilians. We are not in any way, shape, or form attacking indiscriminately. Everything is surgically attacked when we know that there is a terrorist that is on the verge of a ticking bomb coming to attack either our forces or our civilians. I think that unfortunately, in a war, we do have casualties and innocent casualties, but I think the responsibility lies very clearly with the terroristic organizations that is not only attacking our civilians, but hiding behind their own civilians and using them as human shields.
With the time we have, I do want to get your perspective on what we've been seeing here in the U.S., because there's been a wave of bomb threats to Jewish places of worship across the country. 2 more just happening today at synagogues in Ohio. And this is not just an unfortunate random series of threats. We're talking about a dangerous documented rise in anti-Semitism, especially in New York, where you're the acting consulate general. So I do want to ask you about this. Also, Governor Kathy Hochul sent a message today. Let's take a quick listen to that together quickly.
Some communities and college campuses around our state have been engulfed in a blizzard of hatred, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. In an ordinary year, my holiday message would be a simple expression of peace and goodwill. But this year is different.
Do you agree with this, that this year is different?
Look, according to the ADL recent report, there is a rise of 400% of anti-Semitic attacks against Jews and against Israelis in the United States. And it's really, as you said, unacceptable that in the land of the free and the home of the brave, Israelis cannot walk, or Jews cannot walk with a yarmulke, cannot walk with a Star of David out. I think the answer to that, and we see, by the way, these demonstrations that are here in New York, from very radical pro-Hamas that actually call for the genocide of Israel. They don't call for a 2-state solution. They're calling for 1-state solution, a Palestinian state. They are saying from the river to the sea, which is a genocidal attack against Israel. And I think the answer to that is that there has to be consequences. A First Amendment is a crucial amendment that needs to be, of course, safeguarded. But when when it is used to attack violently Jewish institutions and other institutions, I think it's unacceptable. And look, I'm a visitor here, and I know that the land of the free and the home of the brave will know how to protect itself.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.